The baby's cries sliced through the mansion like a siren, and no amount of money could quiet them, until the door opened, and the woman he barely noticed stepped inside, carrying something far more powerful than wealth. Before we begin, if stories about love, loss, and unexpected human connection move you, consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments. It truly helps this channel grow. The mansion had too many rooms for a house that held so little life. Ethan Blackwood stood in the center of the nursery, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded somewhere he couldn't remember, gently bouncing his infant son in his arms as if the motion were a formula he could solve with enough repetition. The baby's face was red, tiny fists clenched, mouth open in a raw, relentless cry that echoed off the pale blue walls. "Shoo, shoo, it's okay," Ethan whispered, though his voice lacked conviction. Nothing he tried worked. He had already checked the obvious things: diaper dry, temperature perfect, crib imported from Italy, rocking chair handcrafted by some famous artisan whose name he'd paid extra to remember and then promptly forgotten. He'd warmed the bottle exactly to the pediatrician's instructions, tested it on his wrist twice, even hummed a tune he vaguely remembered his wife once singing in the kitchen. The baby screamed louder. Ethan's arms ached, but worse than that was the helplessness, sharp, humiliating, and unfamiliar. He was a man who negotiated billion-dollar mergers before breakfast. A man whose signature could shift markets. A man whose staff waited on his every word. Yet here he was, defeated by a 7-week-old child. The nursery smelled faintly of lavender and milk. Sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, illuminating dust motes drifting lazily in the air, indifferent to his unraveling. On the wall hung framed photographs. His wife, Claire, laughing barefoot in the garden. Claire holding a newborn wrapped in a blue blanket. Claire asleep in a hospital bed, exhaustion and joy mingling on her face. Claire who should have been here. The thought tightened his chest. He adjusted his grip on the baby, pressing him closer, as if proximity alone could fill the absence that haunted every corner of the house. "Please," Ethan murmured, more to the universe than to the child. "I'm trying." The baby's cry cracked into something hoarser now, edged with hunger. Ethan glanced at the bottle on the side table. He tried feeding him twice already. The baby had turned his head away, screaming as if offended. Ethan exhaled shakily. Down the hall, the grandfather clock chimed, its deep, measured notes reminding him that time was still moving forward, whether he was ready or not. This was not how his life was supposed to look. Just 2 months ago the house had been loud in a different way. Laughter, music drifting from Claire's phone, arguments over baby names that ended in kisses and eye rolls. She had glowed with exhaustion and excitement, teasing him about how nervous he was, how he kept reading parenting books like they were legal briefs. "You can't spreadsheet a baby, Ethan," she'd said, smiling. Now the silence between the cries felt unbearable. The doctors had called it a complication. Sudden. Rare. Unpreventable. Words that meant nothing in the face of a future she would never see. Ethan shifted again, pacing the length of the room. His polished shoes sank into the plush rug, a gift from a board member who'd signed the condolence card with a neat, impersonal signature. Everyone had been so kind. So distant. They all assumed money would soften the blow. It hadn't. The baby's cries grew weaker, then surged again, desperate and sharp. Ethan felt panic flicker in his chest. Hunger, he realized, not just discomfort. Real hunger. And somehow, terrifyingly, he didn't know how to fix it. He pressed the call button by the door with his elbow. Moments later, soft footsteps approached. The door opened just a fraction. "Sir?" a woman's voice asked quietly. Ethan didn't turn right away. His throat tightened. "I don't know what he needs." The door opened fully. The woman stepped inside, her movements calm, unhurried. She was dressed simply, dark uniform, hair pulled back neatly, hands folded respectfully in front of her. She'd worked in the house for years, always efficient, always invisible in the way staff often became. Her name was Naomi. She took in the scene in a single glance. The exhausted man, the crying baby, the untouched bottle, the grief hanging heavy in the air like a storm that never cleared. "May I?" she asked gently, nodding toward the baby. Ethan hesitated. For reasons he couldn't articulate, something about the request unsettled him. Maybe it was pride. Maybe fear. Maybe the quiet reminder that someone else might succeed where he had failed. Still, his arms were trembling. "Yes," he said at last, his voice barely above a whisper. As Naomi stepped closer, the baby's cries echoed again, thin, hungry, urgent. Ethan didn't know it yet, but in the next few moments, everything he believed about strength, family, and the people he thought he understood was about to change. Naomi didn't rush. That was the first thing Ethan noticed as she approached. No flurry of concern, no frantic reaching like everyone else who had entered the nursery since Claire's funeral. She moved as though time itself had softened around her, her shoes making barely a sound against the rug. The baby wailed again, a raw, trembling cry that scraped along Ethan's nerves. "I'm sorry," Ethan muttered, instinctively apologizing, to her, to the child, to the empty space where his wife should have been. "He hasn't eaten properly in hours. I've tried everything." Naomi didn't contradict him. She simply nodded, eyes gentle, focused not on Ethan but on the baby's clenched fists and trembling chin. "May I hold him?" she asked again, quieter this time. Ethan hesitated for half a second longer than necessary. His arms felt welded to the child, as if letting go meant admitting defeat. But his wrists were burning, his shoulders tight with exhaustion. Slowly, carefully, he transferred the baby into her arms. The instant the baby felt the shift, his cry broke into a sharper pitch. Fear now, not just hunger. Naomi adjusted him instinctively, one hand supporting his head, the other cradling his small back. She didn't bounce him the way Ethan had. She didn't shush him urgently. Instead, she drew him closer to her chest, rocking once, slow, rhythmic. "It's all right," she murmured, not loudly, not insistently. "Just enough. I've got you." The words were simple, but something in her tone made Ethan's breath hitch. The baby's cries faltered. "Just for a heartbeat." Ethan froze. Naomi kept rocking, her body swaying slightly as if following a song only she could hear. She glanced at the bottle on the table, then back at the baby's face, studying him with the careful attention of someone listening to a language without words. "He's hungry," she said softly. "But he's also tired. And he's been crying too long to latch easily." Ethan swallowed. I warmed the bottle exactly like they said." "I know," she replied, not looking at him. "You did right." That, more than anything, made his chest ache. Naomi lifted the bottle, testing it with a practiced drop on her wrist. Then she angled the nipple toward the baby's lips, but didn't force it. She waited. Rocked once more. The baby whimpered, face scrunching, then turned his head away again. Ethan felt his hope deflate. But Naomi only adjusted her hold, humming now, a low, steady sound barely audible. It wasn't a melody Ethan recognized. It sounded older than the room, older than the house. Slowly the baby's body softened. His fists unclenched. His cries faded into uneven breaths. Naomi brought the bottle back, brushing it gently against his lips. This time the baby latched. The sound was quiet, almost insignificant, but to Ethan, it thundered. The baby sucked hungrily, small jaw working with surprising strength. His face relaxed, the red fading as the bottle emptied steadily. Ethan stared. He hadn't realized he was holding his breath until it rushed out of him all at once. His knees felt weak. He leaned against the dresser, one hand gripping the edge as if the floor had tilted beneath him. "How did you?" His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "How did you do that?" Naomi didn't smile. She didn't look proud. She just watched the baby eat. "I've cared for many children," she said simply. "Some with mothers. Some without." The words settled heavily in the room. Ethan's gaze drifted to the photos on the wall. Claire's smile. Her hand resting on her pregnant belly. The future frozen in glass and wood. "I should be able to do this," he said quietly, more confession than statement. "I'm his father." Naomi glanced at him then, not judgmental, not surprised. Just kind. "And you will," she said. "But grief makes even simple things feel impossible." The baby finished the bottle with a final satisfied suck, then released it, mouth slack with contentment. Naomi shifted him again, resting his head against her shoulder. She patted his back gently, rhythm unchanged. A small burp escaped him. Ethan let out a sound that was almost a laugh, almost a sob. The baby sighed. Then, impossibly, he slept. The nursery fell silent. Not the empty, aching silence Ethan had grown used to, but a soft, living quiet, broken only by the baby's tiny breaths. Ethan covered his mouth with his hand. His eyes burned. Naomi continued to hold the child, rocking once or twice more, until she was certain. Then she looked to Ethan, silently asking permission. He nodded. She laid the baby into the crib, tucking the blanket around him with care that bordered on reverence. The baby didn't stir. Ethan felt something shift inside him, subtle, unsettling, undeniable. For the first time since Claire died, he wasn't alone in the room with his failure. He was standing beside someone who saw him not as a CEO, not as a man with limitless resources, but as a father learning how to survive the unthinkable. And Naomi, the woman he had barely noticed for years, had just done what all his wealth could not. She had fed his child. She had calmed the storm. And without meaning to, she had cracked open a door in Ethan's guarded heart, one that would not close again. The silence didn't last. It never did. Ethan remained standing by the crib long after Naomi stepped back, his eyes fixed on his son's peaceful face as if afraid the moment would shatter if he moved. The baby's chest rose and fell in tiny, steady rhythms, proof of life, of calm, of something Ethan hadn't been able to provide on his own. Naomi gathered the empty bottle, rinsed it quietly at the small sink in the corner of the nursery, and returned it to its place. Her movements were careful, respectful, as though she understood that the air itself was fragile. "Thank you," Ethan said finally. The words felt inadequate. Too small. They landed between them and seemed to shrink further in the vast room. Naomi inclined her head. "Of course, sir." She turned to leave. Ethan surprised himself by speaking again. "Wait." She paused at the door. He struggled, fingers curling at his sides. "If you're not busy, would you mind staying close tonight? Just in case." The request cost him something. He felt it. Pride, perhaps. Or the illusion that he could still control every outcome if he worked hard enough. Naomi studied him for a brief moment, then nodded. "I'll be nearby." When the door closed behind her, Ethan sank into the rocking chair, his body finally registering how exhausted it was. His phone buzzed on the side table. Emails, messages, reminders of meetings he'd postponed for the third day in a row. He didn't look. Instead, he watched his son sleep. For the first time since the funeral, his grief loosened its grip just enough for something else to surface. Fear. What if this calm was temporary? What if he failed again? The baby woke less than 2 hours later. This time, Ethan heard the first soft whimper before it escalated. He was on his feet instantly, heart racing. He checked the crib, touched the baby's cheek, murmured reassurances that felt clumsy but sincere. The cries grew louder. Ethan hesitated, then pressed the call button again. Naomi arrived almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting just outside the door. "I tried," Ethan said quickly, as though defending himself. "I don't want to rely on you every time." Naomi stepped closer, her gaze flicking between Ethan and the baby. "Show me what you did." He explained awkwardly, how he'd checked the diaper, how he'd warmed the bottle, how he'd held him. Naomi listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. "You're doing the steps," she said. "But babies feel more than steps. They feel steadiness." She gestured gently. "May I guide you?" "Guide you." The word struck him. No one guided Ethan Blackwood. People advised, negotiated, deferred. Still, he handed her the bottle and followed her instructions as she showed him how to slow his breathing, how to hold the baby closer to his chest, how to pause instead of rushing to fix. "Let him feel you," she said softly. "Not your worry." The baby cried. Ethan's arms trembled. Naomi didn't take the child this time. She stood beside him. "Breathe," she said. "He's listening." Ethan swallowed hard and tried again. He focused on the baby's warmth, on the weight of him, on the tiny fingers curling around his shirt. The cries softened. Not gone, but quieter. Naomi smiled then, just a little. "There," she whispered. "You see." Something in Ethan's chest tightened, not with panic but with awe. Over the next few days, a pattern formed. Ethan stayed home from work longer than planned. The board could wait. The markets didn't collapse. The world, infuriatingly, continued without him. But inside the mansion, everything changed. Naomi became a quiet presence in the nursery, never overstepping, never insisting. She showed him how to recognize different cries, how hunger sounded different from discomfort, how exhaustion came with a certain restless kick. Sometimes she spoke about babies. Sometimes she didn't speak at all. In the silences, Ethan noticed things he'd never paid attention to before. The faint scar along her forearm, the way her shoulders tensed when she heard raised voices on the phone, the tenderness in her eyes when she looked at his son. "You're very good with him," Ethan said one evening, watching her soothe the baby with a gentle hum. Naomi didn't look up. "I've had practice." He waited, unsure whether to ask more. She continued anyway. "I raised my younger brothers. And later, other people's children." The pause that followed carried weight. "And your own?" Ethan asked quietly. Naomi's hands stilled for half a second before resuming their rhythm. "I lost him," she said simply. Ethan felt the words land like a stone in his chest. "I'm sorry," he said. "So am I," she replied. No details. No explanations. Just shared understanding. That night, after Naomi left the nursery, Ethan sat alone in the rocking chair, the baby asleep against him. He thought about how grief carved different shapes into different lives, and how easily he'd assumed his own pain was unique. Whispers began to circulate. A visiting executive noticed Naomi in the nursery. A relative commented on how often she was around. One afternoon, Ethan overheard a hushed conversation between staff in the hallway, tones sharp with judgment, curiosity edged with something uglier. He didn't confront them, but the tension seeped in. Ethan started noticing how Naomi moved through the house, how she made herself smaller, quieter, invisible again when others were present. How she addressed him more formally in public, retreating behind "sir" and lowered eyes. The contrast unsettled him. One evening, after the baby finally fell asleep in Ethan's arms, he spoke without turning around. "You don't have to disappear," he said. Naomi stood by the door. "I know my place." "That's not what I meant." She hesitated. "With respect, sir, it is exactly what everyone else means." The truth of it stung. Ethan turned then, meeting her gaze. "You're helping me survive this," he said. "You're helping my son. That matters." Naomi studied him carefully as if weighing whether to believe him. Before she could answer, the baby stirred. The moment passed. If this story is resonating with you, the quiet moments, the unspoken bonds, take a second to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like this grow because of listeners like you. The tension reached a breaking point a week later. Ethan returned early from a brief meeting, his mind already on the nursery. As he approached, he heard raised voices. "Crossing boundaries," someone snapped. Ethan stopped short. Naomi's voice followed, calm, restrained. "I'm only doing what I was asked." "That's not the point," another voice replied. "People are talking." Ethan stepped into the room. Silence fell instantly. The staff member stiffened. Naomi's shoulders squared, but she didn't look at him. "What's going on?" Ethan asked. The explanation came haltingly, concerns about appearances, about propriety, about how it looked for Naomi to be so involved. Ethan listened without interrupting. Then he spoke. "She's here because I asked her to be," he said evenly. "Because she helps my son. Because I trust her." No one argued. When they left, Naomi remained, eyes lowered. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said quietly. Ethan exhaled. "You're not the trouble." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. For the first time, both of them understood the truth they'd been circling. What had begun as necessity had become connection. And connection in a house built on distance and hierarchy was dangerous. Yet neither of them stepped away. Not yet. The storm broke on a Sunday morning. Rain battered the tall windows, streaking the glass like restless veins, the sky outside the color of wet ash. The mansion felt smaller somehow, its grandeur pressed inward by the weather, by the tension that had been building for days. Ethan stood in the nursery, holding his son against his shoulder. The baby was restless, not crying yet, but close. Ethan rocked slowly, murmuring, counting breaths the way Naomi had taught him. He was getting better. That should have made everything easier. Instead, it made the choice before him impossible to ignore. A knock came at the door. Naomi stepped in, pausing when she saw Ethan already holding the baby. For a fleeting second, something like pride crossed her face, quickly masked, carefully hidden. "I heard him stirring," she said. "I've got him," Ethan replied. Then after a beat, "But, stay." She did. They stood together in the quiet, rain drumming outside, the baby's warmth between them like a fragile bridge. "I had a call this morning," Ethan said. Naomi waited. "My mother," he continued. "She's coming to stay. Indefinitely." Naomi's hands tightened around each other. "She thinks I need structure," Ethan said, the word edged with bitterness. "That the house has become too informal." Naomi understood immediately. "And me?" she asked gently. Ethan closed his eyes. "She wants me to hire a certified nanny. Full-time. Someone appropriate." The baby whimpered softly as if sensing the shift. Naomi stepped back. "I see," she said. The calm in her voice was more painful than anger would have been. "She thinks," Ethan went on, desperation creeping in, "that people are getting ideas. That boundaries are blurred." Naomi nodded slowly. "They always are when grief is involved." "That's not fair," he said quickly. "You didn't blur anything. You saved us." Naomi finally looked at him, then really looked, eyes steady, unflinching. "And what happens when she's here?" Naomi asked. "When the board visits. When the world starts watching again." Ethan had no answer. The baby began to cry in earnest now, sharp and sudden. Ethan bounced him instinctively, heart pounding. not from helplessness this time, but from the fear of what he was about to lose. Naomi stepped forward, then stopped herself. "Let me," she said, and then caught her breath, correcting herself. "No. You can do it." Ethan adjusted his hold, whispered reassurances. The baby cried harder. Panic flared. Naomi moved despite herself, hands lifting, ready to help, then freezing in midair. This was the moment. If she took the baby, everything would continue as it had, quietly, secretly, precariously. She didn't. "I don't want you to go," Ethan said suddenly. The words fell into the room like shattered glass. Naomi stared at him. "That's not a decision," she said softly. "That's a feeling." "I know," he replied. "But it's the truth." The baby screamed now, a full-bodied cry that filled the room. Rain thundered outside. Naomi swallowed hard. "Your mother won't accept this," she said. "Your world won't." "I don't care about the world," Ethan said, voice breaking. "I care about my son. And he stopped himself, breath hitching. "I care about you." Silence. Naomi stepped back fully now, distance reclaiming its place between them. "I am not something you hold on to because you're drowning," she said, pain threaded through her calm. "I won't be that." "That's not." "You're grieving," she continued. "And grief makes people cling. But when the fog lifts, I'll be the mistake everyone warned you about." The baby's cries faltered, then surged again. Ethan felt tears spill over, hot, humiliating, unstoppable. "I don't know how to do this without you," he admitted. Naomi's eyes shone. "That," she said, "is exactly why you must." She stepped forward one last time, placing her hands gently over Ethan's, adjusting the baby's position just enough. "Breathe," she whispered. "You can." The baby's cries softened, then slowed. Ethan held on, every muscle shaking, every instinct screaming to beg her to stay. But Naomi stepped away. "I'll finish the week," she said quietly. "Then I'll ask to be reassigned." The words struck harder than any argument. Before Ethan could respond, the nursery door opened. His mother stood there, perfectly composed, eyes sharp, taking in the scene, the baby, Ethan's tears, Naomi's presence. Her gaze lingered on Naomi. "Ethan," she said coolly, "we need to talk." Naomi lowered her eyes. Ethan looked between them, the weight of everything pressing down at once. Loss, love, fear, and the unbearable knowledge that whatever he chose next would change all of their lives forever. The baby let out a small, tired sigh and finally slept. And in that fragile stillness, Ethan understood. This wasn't about appearances. This was about courage. And he was out of time. The conversation with his mother lasted less than 10 minutes. Felt like an hour. Ethan stood in his study while rain streaked down the windows behind her, his mother seated across from him with her back perfectly straight, hands folded as if nothing in the world could unsettle her. "This arrangement is inappropriate," she said calmly. "You are vulnerable. People will take advantage of that." Ethan didn't raise his voice. For the first time in his life he didn't need to. "My son is alive because of her," he said. "Not biologically, but emotionally. She helped him when I couldn't." "That doesn't make her family," his mother replied. Ethan met her gaze. "Neither does blood alone." The words surprised them both. "I'm not asking for permission," he continued, steadier now. "I'm informing you. Naomi is staying. Not as staff. Not as something to whisper about." His mother's lips tightened. "And what exactly is she to you?" Ethan thought of the nursery at night. Of quiet guidance. Of shared grief. Of the way his son slept best when Naomi hummed. "She is someone who chose compassion when she owed me nothing," he said. "And I won't discard her to make others comfortable." Silence stretched. At last his mother stood. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," Ethan said. "But it will be mine." She left the house that afternoon. Naomi finished out the week just as she promised. Quiet. Professional. Distant. Each hour felt heavier than the last. On Friday evening she packed her things neatly, folding her uniform with the same care she gave everything else. She paused in the nursery doorway one final time, watching the baby sleep. "You'll be all right," she whispered to him. "Naomi." She turned. Ethan stood behind her, holding a folded document in his hand. "I don't want you reassigned," he said. "I don't want you leaving because you think you're temporary." She searched his face. "Ethan." "I went to therapy," he said. "Not once. Not impulsively. I'm still going. I know grief doesn't excuse confusion. And I know love shouldn't grow in shadows." He handed her the paper. It wasn't a contract. It was a letter. "I'm asking you," he said quietly, To stay in this house because you choose to. As family. As someone I respect. And, if you want, as someone I hope to build something real with. Slowly. Openly. With my son at the center. Naomi's hands trembled as she read. Tears slid down her cheeks, silent, unashamed. You don't need me to survive anymore, she said softly. No, Ethan replied. I want you because I finally can stand on my own. She nodded once. Yes, she said. Months later the mansion felt different. Lived in. Laughter returned, not loud, not forced. Just real. Ethan fed his son with confidence now, rocking him effortlessly. Naomi sat nearby, no longer invisible, no longer shrinking. They weren't pretending the past didn't exist. They were honoring it by choosing life. On the nursery wall, a new photo hung beside Claire's. A baby between two adults. Peaceful. Safe. Love. And if this story of healing, courage, and chosen family moved you, don't forget to subscribe, and leave a comment sharing what part touched you most. Your voice keeps stories like this alive. The end.